when I was on Westport Road.
Yeah, when you were on Westport Road. Yeah. It's a whole different deal.
That was fun. That started with, I have a friend, Chet, has a tattoo shop in town here. And he got together with Rico, and they started having a local tattoo convention. They decided to have one, so they invited me to it. I was living in Texas. So I came up from Texas to the convention and everything, got to know Chet real well. And he's a hell of a guy. And then a few years later, I decided to move back to Kansas City. So I called up Chet and I said, hey, Chet, can I work at your tattoo shop? I want to move back to KC. He said, yeah, come on up here. You can work here. So he had two shops, one downtown and one on Westport Road. So I started working in Westport Road. And I was there several months. And he came to me one day and he said, you know, this place really doesn't make money for me, which it didn't. There was no walk-in traffic there. It was just not the greatest place for a storefront. And he said, you know, I'm just going to close the place. He goes, do you want this tattoo shop? He goes, you can just put your name on the window and you can pay me later whenever you get the money for it, for the sterilizer and the copy machine and the chairs.
And for the equipment.
Yeah. And I said, thanks. I'll see if I can make it work. So I took over the tattoo shop. And so then I'm like, oh, I appreciate that, Chet. That's something that people just like, you just don't normally hear that kind of thing.
Right.
You know, that kind of charity.
Yeah.
Really cool guy. So I'm like, you know what? I got something for you. Like, check this out. Hey, how you doing? Hey, we're closed today, you guys.
Are you?
Yeah, we're normally open. We'll be open tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
That's cool.
So
I just wanted to ask.
we're open every day except today.
Right on. I just saw see you over here. So I just want to ask you a quick question. My kid is turning 18 on Friday. Wants to get a tattoo. He's drawing something up and seeing if you recommend somebody.
Yeah, we got a whole bunch of art. There's 9 artists that work for this company, and they're all professionals. So we could definitely find somebody that for you to do that for sure.
Cool.
But he does have to be 18.
Yeah.
So we got to wait till his birthday.
Does he have to be 18 to drop the art off and kind of get the process going? Or?
No, and you could do that at the main tattoo shop.
Yeah.
It's just right around the corner.
All right. Do you have anybody in mind we should talk to? Or?
Well, I would take who's ever is like the most available.
Right on.
You know, and then you could like get it started. All them guys over there are professionals.
Yeah.
There's nobody that works there as a sloucher.
I've done my shit before. I'm David Dykes.
Everybody that works there is better than I am. They are really. So yeah, go around the corner and talk to Joe Haw, and she could probably line you up with if there's an artist there. She'll get you going like right away. Otherwise, she'll give you the paper with everyone's Instagram on them, and you can contact people on Instagram.
That's cool.
And you can send the design to them and everything. They can get ready for you.
Cool. What are you guys shooting?
Just a podcast.
Right.
You're part of it now.
Yeah, you've officially.
Yeah, tell Joe Haw I sent you over there.
Photobombed the podcast.
Joe Haw's over there now. Tell her I sent you.
Who is it?
Joe Haw.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, she'll fix you up, man. Thanks.
See you, man.
Yeah, so I told Chet, I'm like, I got something, man. Come follow me. Check this out. So I took him over to Hawaii and introduced him my people over there, my ohana, and you know, let him know this guy's a solid dude, you know. And he didn't come back to Kansas City for 8 years.
Oh shit.
He stayed there.
Whoa.
Yeah, Hawaii. Yeah.
And that's Mercy Seat?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so that's why all the cats that work. So you're the reason why all the cats that work at the Mercy Seat always end up going to Hawaii to tattoo.
Oh yeah, it's a Hawaii Kansas City connection strong.
Wow.
Yeah. I started going over there in the early '90s, '93 or '94, I guess. I went over in '93 and was there for New Year's. So
yeah,
and I got a gig over there where I worked 6 months, and then I come back home and I had an apartment, and there was a guy that worked there also who worked 6 months. He worked there when I wasn't there, and we shared the apartment.
Okay.
Sort of. So I'd call him up before I went over there and say, I'm on my way. He said, yeah, I'm on my way out. And we might pass each other in the airport. And I'd go over there and take over the apartment and go right into the chair and work
Wow.
6 months. I'd go over there at the end of October and come back the 1st of May. So that's the whole winter, 6 months every year. I
Yeah.
did that for over 10 years. And so, yeah, I had a really solid, and Hawaii is the most beautiful place on earth. It really is. And there's two things about the economy there most people don't realize. Everyone says, isn't it expensive living in Hawaii? Well, yeah, sort of. But everything's expensive in Hawaii, right?
Right.
Yeah. So if you have a job in Hawaii,
yeah, you're
yeah,
making enough money to
there's,
live in Hawaii.
there's two parts expensive. There's the part where you got to pay out, and there's the part where
You're
you know,
charging people.
yeah, man. And so what you don't want to do is make your money in the Midwest and spend it in Hawaii.
Right.
That's what most people do. But if you can make your money in Hawaii and bring it to the Midwest to spend it, that's what you call, it's not expensive, it's lucrative.
Yeah, for sure. And if you just go down there and, yeah, like you said, if you go down there all winter long and you're working all winter.
Oh man, there was a weird phenomenon. The first time I went over there, I knew I was going to be there for a fairly extended amount of time. And I left here, and it was, I think it was December, yeah, right after Christmas I went over there because the test is in January, first few weeks of January. So I went over there to study and everything, make sure I was ready for the test. Hawaii at that time was the only state that you had to be licensed in. And you had to
Okay.
take a 3-hour test, so they just couldn't get people to work over there, you know. And so I was like, yeah, I'm willing. So I went over there to take the test and all that. But the first time I went there, I got off the plane from here and everything's cold and dead and gray. And I got off the plane there and you're immediately overdressed.
Yeah.
You know, it's hot, it's humid, everything's green, there's birds singing, there's people wearing hardly any clothes everywhere, the sun's shining. And I got this weird feeling. It was really unfamiliar feeling. I'd never felt it. So it was weird. It felt weird. And so, but I finally got over it after a while. And then the next year I went over there again. And I walk in there, 1st of October, and everything's already dead, gray, cold. I get off the plane, everything's green and humid. And I got that feeling again. Really unfamiliar. I'd never felt, well, I felt this before last year, but it's still kind of unfamiliar feeling. It's just overwhelming feeling. And I just didn't put my finger on it. So the next year I went, about the 3rd year I got off the plane, everything's green, and I had that feeling again. I recognized it. Now,
Yeah.
I felt this before. I know what this feeling is now.
Yeah.
And so, you know what that feeling was?
You know, what was it?
I felt smart.
Oh.
I never felt like that before.
Yeah.
Oh man, I felt smart. I was getting off the plane, leaving 10 million people freezing their fucking nuts off for the next 6 months, and I'm gonna be in Hawaii.
Yeah. Man, that's
I
just.
never felt that. I never felt that before. Wow, I really did feel smart.
I know some people that do the opposite, and I never understood it. Where they
Well, the fellow
prefer-
that I relieved used to. He didn't want to be there in the winter. He wanted to be there in the summer.
Yeah.
He wanted to be at home on the East Coast in the winter.
Yeah.
So we just switched places.
Yeah, and I know somebody they come here in the winter, and then they go up north in the summer. They just hate the heat. It's
Well, it was actually Hawaii's actually busier in the summer.
yeah,
Because people in the United States
are
take summers off to vacation.
right.
Where everyone else is go over there in the winter, like the Japanese are there. And,
Yeah, the off season.
mm-hmm.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Black Magic TV. I'm sitting here with Wes Grimm, and we're inside of the Grimm Tattoo Museum in Kansas City, which you heard about when we were talking to Davey. And that was Wes telling us about how he went to Hawaii, which is real wild. What year did you start into the tattoo industry, Wes?
About 79, I guess. I worked on a riverboat in my early 20s, and you work on the river 30 days, and then you get 30 days off. So on my 30 days off, I pretty much dedicated myself to being a young alcoholic, you know. And so I was having fun on my motorcycle and stuff on my 30 days off. 6 months a year paid vacation. It was great. And then Grandpa started bugging me. And I knew he tattooed. He tattooed all the men in the family. And I knew that since I was a little kid. And now he wants me to come and help him with his tattoo outfit.
Yeah.
And he had a trailer that he pulled around to motorcycle events, races, rallies, motorcycle shows, things like that. And he tattooed bikers. And so I started helping him. I started hanging out with him. I'd help him with the trailer, get over to his house before sun up, you know, and help him pack the thing up and all this stuff. And we'd take it out, and I just generally I'd sell tattoos for him and just generally help him out with it. And then I started coming over a couple times a week to his house, to his tattoo setup, and I'd sit and paint. Then he sort of instructed me how to paint the designs, and we did that for about a year. And then I was on the boat one time, and I got off in Fairfax. Now, the riverboat, it goes all up and down all the rivers. We've been up and down the Ohio, the Missouri, all the way up and down Mississippi, the Illinois. And so I got back from a 30-day trip, and it just happened to be loading barges at Sugar Creek. So I got off the boat in Sugar Creek, and usually my habit, if I got off in Kansas City, I'd get a cab and tell them to take me straight to 7-Eleven first. And I'd go in and buy a half a pint of Jack Daniels and get a newspaper, because you can't drink on the boat, and you're just out of touch with everything. So
Right.
I go in and I buy this newspaper and this half a pint, and I get in the cab and I open up the newspaper, and it was an article on Grandpa and Great Grandpa that had just opened a tattoo shop on Main Street. I saw that in the
wow.
paper, and I was like, oh my God, they're leaving me behind. I thought I was a part of this thing. you
Yeah.
know? And so I went home and took a shower and put on clean clothes. Boat makes everything smell like diesel fuel. So I got all cleaned up, and I went down to the address that I saw in the paper, and the two of them were there at the tattoo shop. And I went in to get a tattoo. I walked in, I want to get a tattoo, and Grandpa was busy. So Bert was going to do a Great Grandpa. And he says, he goes, this was 1980, June 1980.
Okay.
And so Great Grandpa says, well, you know, your grandpa said he'd give you a free tattoo, but I'm working here for 50%. And he goes, I'm doing the tattoo, so my 50% is going to cost you $25. His 50% is free. So I'm like, all right, I can pay that. So Bert tattooed this Grim Reaper on my arm. And Grandpa had said that I could do a tattoo if I could find somebody to sit down. I could use his stuff and do a tattoo, you know.
Yeah.
So I reminded him. I said, you said I could tattoo if I could find somebody, right? He goes, yeah. So I went straight over to my uncle's house.
Okay.
And he had Mary tattooed on his arm like some sort of prison thing.
Yeah.
And my aunt's name was Nancy. So I'm like, hey, Uncle, when are you going to let me cover that up? You know, I've been working with Grandpa for a year, which I was implying that I knew how to tattoo.
Yeah. Right.
And my aunt chimed in. It's like, yeah, you're going to cover that up. So then he was all locked into it. So next day I showed up over to my uncle's house, put him on the back of my Super Glide, and gave him a ride down the 38th of Maine, and took him in there and tattooed a parrot on top of the Mary that he had, with Grandpa and Bert standing right behind me watching me.
Right. Making sure you were doing it right.
The funny thing is, I was afraid they were going to try to instruct me, say, stop, don't do that, pick that up, or something like that.
Right.
So, and then give away to my uncle that I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. So I was scared that was going to happen. So the whole time they were watching me. And whenever I got to a point where I'm not sure what to do next, instead of thinking, what do I do next, I would grab a Kleenex and wipe off my hands with it, throw the Kleenex away. So like I went through a whole box of Kleenex thinking, what am I supposed to do next? And I didn't want them to instruct me. I just had to stay busy, you know. But I managed to make it all the way through the thing, colored it in and everything, covered it up. And so then I bandaged his arm up and took him outside, got him on the motorcycle, and took off. And, you know, when you got a passenger on the back, passenger's job is to hang on, right? And your job is to look for traffic to make sure everything's safe and proceed. Passenger's job to hang on. Well, my uncle, he wants to do my job. So I look for traffic. There is none, so I take off. He looks for traffic, and while he's looking for traffic, I took off. Well, he wasn't hanging on. So he bends over backwards and puts his hand on the pavement to keep from falling off. He's grabbed hold of the motorcycle, and he's dragging his hand on the pavement. So I'm going down the street, and the motorcycle's acting weird. And I look back, and the uncle's hanging off the motorcycle, dragging his hand. So I stop the motorcycle. He sits up, turns his hand over, and of course all the skin is just like down at the end of his hand, like hanging off like a glove. So I had to go back, take him back in the tattoo shop, put a big bandage on his hand, and when I took him back to my aunt's house, when he took his leg off that motorcycle, I took off. I didn't even wait for the helmet. I didn't want to explain to my aunt while he had bandages all over him.
He just came back totally bandaged up.
Don't fuck him all up.
Now from that,
So that was 1980. That's when I started. I started tattooing like regular from then on.
right, so you never went back on the boat after that?
Oh
or
yeah. I kept doing that for another year or so, but then it got
When
to
you
where,
were on your 30 days off, you were at the tat shop.
Yeah, that's what I did, on Main Street. So it got, in your 20s, I might be on the boat for 3 weeks,
Right.
and go by Kansas City on a Saturday night, and you see all the lights, from the river, and you see the highways, and everyone's going everywhere. You think all them people are going to the movies and having dates and going out to dinner, and then the boat just keeps on shoving right into the fucking darkness again.
Yeah.
And in your 20s, that's hard to do.
For sure.
And I could have been on Main Street,
Tattooing and
like on
living
Main
it up.
Street, man,
Yeah.
on the street, and so, yeah, it got to where it was like, I'm not getting on the boat no more. I realized one day, I looked up and was like, I can make $100 in one day tattooing. $100 in one day.
Right.
That was astonishing to me, and so, especially back then. So
That's a lot of money in
that's what
1980.
what captains made.
Yeah.
They made $100 a day for being on that boat. Captains. And I thought I wanted to be a captain. That's what I was doing. When I quit, I was a steersman. I was started as a green deckhand, then you're a deckhand. Then they promoted me to third mate, which is sort of the smallest boss of the deckhands. And then I was second mate. Then they promoted me first mate, which the whole company only has one first mate. That's for all the boats, And then they promoted me into the pilot house. I learned how to steer the boat. And then that's all I did was just steer the boat. I was steersman. That's all I had to do. But it was in my early 20s. I just couldn't be convinced to get back on that damn thing again.
Well, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to do it either.
Yeah, so, I started tattooing regular then.
And how long did you guys stay down there on 38th and
Well, that place was open for like 17 years.
And did you stay the whole time, or did you?
Well, the last few years I wasn't there. The mayor threw me out, so I had to leave the town.
Yeah. Oh, you left. That's when you left town. And did you end up in Texas after that?
You ended up in Texas, yeah.
Yeah.
I left. I went to Hollywood because I had a regular seat there, and worked on Sunset at Tattoo Mania.
Okay.
That was a lot of fun. That was a great place to work. A lot of fun. A lot of fun working in Hollywood. And then I, had a seat in Hawaii too, and I went there and stayed a year or so, and decided I couldn't really spend my whole life in Hawaii.
Right.
Not the whole life. And so I found a good place in Texas and sort of lit there. Yeah.
What part of Texas did you stay?
Dallas.
Okay.
I worked for Fine Line.
Okay. And I mean, back then there probably wasn't a whole. It was because your great grandpa was in California, right? That was his original home base.
Well, he was a traveling tattoo guy.
Okay.
He ended up in St. Louis for 30 years.
Okay.
Shot there, and then he ended up in Long Beach, which he's most known for.
Right.
He was there for then on quite some time.
Yeah. So you were able back then. There's not a lot of tattoo artists, I'd imagine, like there are today.
There were a lot less. At one time, after Grandpa was out of it, and there was a guy here in town called his place the Illustrated Man.
Mm-hmm.
It was run by a guy named Doc, whose mother taught him how to tattoo. Her name was Faye, who learned how to tattoo from Bert.
Okay.
So even then, there was everyone that did it were all connected.
They were all,
pretty
yeah, because it
small.
was always like this guy taught this guy, and
Literally
later on,
family.
Right.
Literally family. So, and there was the two of us when Grandpa opened there. And then after a time, Doc died, and he, the fellow that worked for him ended up running the place for a while, but that closed, and it moved around a little bit. It was open and closed. So for a while there, I was the only professional tattoo artist working in a tattoo shop on the street in the whole town.
right? Because there
just weren't that many people doing it. Yeah.
But it made it easy to where you could, because you get to know the people out of town. So if you want to take up and leave, you
Cool
can
thing
just-
about that was, like, fast forward like 8 years. I started in 1980. By I believe it was might have been earlier. 1980. Well, let's fast forward 3 years. 82 or 83. There were 7 tattoo shops in town. 7.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, And I went to New York. I was tattooing on the East Coast quite a bit, doing the biker thing. And it was in New York, and they have a monthly meeting with all, and it's against the law to tattoo in New York, but they had a monthly meeting of all the tattoo artists, and they had a big party.
Okay.
And I thought, well, they can do that in New York. Why couldn't we do that? There's only 7 of us here. So when I got home, I'm like dead set. I want to start this Kansas City Tattoo Society. So I called all, I don't even know why. I was like, we should just all get together, you know?
Right.
And so I called everybody in town, and finally everyone agreed to meet on a Tuesday at the bar across the street from me, and we're going to have a drink and just talk. I got all 7 of them to show up. And we pushed 2 cocktail tables together, ordered a drink for the both tables, and we talked and argued. And none of the people liked each other, but they all showed up to my meeting. And so we had another drink, and we argued and argued. And the argument, surprisingly to me, was about our hourly wage, our hourly charges.
Wow. Yeah.
And they all argued because Cindy was only charging $40 an hour. Al wanted to charge 120. Illustrated Man wanted to charge 100. I was charging 60.
Yeah.
Or 80. I think I was charging $80, I guess. And so then Cindy was like, well, my customers won't pay that much. And I was like, that's not enough, you know. And so they had this big argument. And when we got done, they all agreed that we would charge $100 an hour.
Yeah.
All of us agreed. We fixed the prices.
Yeah.
And so I really, truly believe that today, the reason there's so many tattoo artists in this town is because the price was for years artificially high. It
Right.
started off high, it stayed high, and it made it so where you could actually make a living tattooing in this
Right.
town.
Yeah, because I remember being a kid, there was no go in and you tell me.
There was no negotiation.
There was no negotiation, and nobody, it wasn't like.
And no,
They-
it
it's
created,
not like they looked at that piece and said, I'll do that for $80 right now. It was like, no, it's $100 an hour with a 1 hour minimum. And then they just, next thing you know, you better be a cool person, because if not, somebody
we fixed it in the 80s, and not it also created the weird, like, my word is my word and that's it.
Right.
Sort of attitude that tattoo artists have in this town.
Yeah.
They have that sort of that moral authority that they exercise.
Yeah.
That's what that did. It's like you can't go anywhere and get a better price. I told you $100 and that's it.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of made it to that point once it got into the era of like less flash and more original art. It probably made it to where it was dependent on like, oh, I really like the way this guy does this, so I'll go to him for it. And then they might go across town to another guy to get another tattoo.
Yeah.
But yeah, then it also is like, well, for the people that were, the lady who was like, oh, you're not, my customers won't pay that much. Well, now they don't have a choice because we are all charging. It's no different than like a body shop, right? Like there's like a standard rate that everyone charges because it's what the but that's dictated by the insurance company, of course. But
Well,
same type of deal. Like
well,
everybody's
so, you know,
charging 65.
What we did was a felony.
Right.
But I looked it up, and the statute of limitations on that type of felony is 2 years.
Yeah. I think we're all right. That was.
So I can talk about
We
it.
can talk about it now, yeah. Well, we've all committed lots of felonies.
No, none of us. I did one a long time ago. and
Just
I
the
got
one.
caught and I paid for it.
I already paid my time
Yeah,
for
man,
mine.
I did that. And I learned my lesson, and I staunchly avoid felonies now.
Yeah. And what year was it that you came back and took over the shop on 39th Street from Texas?
Westport Road.
Yeah,
from Texas.
I guess we're on 39th Street right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Westport Road. It was 2010.
Okay. And then you were there. How long did you stay in that location?
Just about a year.
Yeah, and then and then you moved up around the corner on Broadway.
Yeah, but it's been like a steady, slow expansion ever since.
Yeah, right. And now you have the location on Broadway, which is very well known in the city because you're definitely. I always thought it was cool how you kind of stay old school in that, like, oh yeah, we open at like 11 and we're open till midnight or
Well,
1 a.m.
it's noon to midnight, which
Noon
was
to
always
midnight,
my thing.
yeah.
And what I wanted to do was bring a nightlife to this podunk town. Everybody likes to think of Kansas City as like a party town, you know.
Yeah.
And that's sort of our branding for us. But and then when the sidewalks close up at 8 o'clock, there's nothing to do.
Nothing to
like,
do,
what kind
yeah.
of town is this? So
Right.
we're trying to bring that party spirit that Kansas City has. We bring it.
Right.
The reason Kansas City is a major metropolitan place because you can go get a tattoo at 10 o'clock. You can't do that in
I think you
Peoria.
might be the only person left. I remember when I was younger, when I was a teenager, most shops were open late because you couldn't go to your boss 20 years ago and go, hey, I got to take Tuesday off because I'm going to go get tattooed.
Yeah,
Whereas,
Wednesday.
yeah, like now people do that and it's like, well, yeah, or you just go get tattooed when you're not at work, like it's really weird to me that.
Well, also, you want to go out and party, and it's a party town. That's why you came to Kansas
Right.
City. Then you go outside, and the sidewalks are all rolled up.
There's no one out there.
Next
Nothing
time you
going
go to
on.
New York or something, I mean, we bring it. We bring the fucking party to Kansas City. We're open till midnight.
Yeah. Oh, and there's always.
Nightlife.
And there's always. I've never gone up there to see Davey or even driven by, especially on a weekend where there isn't people on the bench, people inside waiting. And Davey was always telling me about how it's like, hey, it's first come, first serve, and
what the
be
artists,
next.
our professional artists will recognize that they're in the service industry.
Right.
And so they will want to work on a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday, where most people think that they have a huge right to not work on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They want to party, which is great because we have to be there for them. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to take Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. If there's nobody working, if they can't go to a restaurant, they can't see a movie. I mean, people have to work on those days.
Right.
And that's what we do. We bring it on the weekends, on the holidays, man.
Right. And then also, for you guys, like, and I'm kind of the same way. Like, what's it matter if I got Saturday or Tuesday off? I can do the same thing I'm gonna do on a Tuesday that I would do on a Saturday. There's still.
Funny thing was, like 4 or 5 years ago, I had a sort of a different crew than I got now, and I came to work on Labor Day, and the front guy showed up. He's on the payroll. He just does the counter and answers the phone.
Right.
And sells the tattoos. They have a huge job, but so he's on the payroll and he shows up, but none of the artists do. So I started calling him up. I'm like, well, why aren't you here? It's Labor Day. Everyone's got the day off. They're like, well, I didn't come in today because it's Labor Day. Every one of them told me that. Well, it's Labor Day. And I had to explain to all of them that you're not labor. You're talent. You're service industry.
Yeah.
When everyone else has the day off, we're supposed to be working. You don't get Labor Day off. You're not labor.
And
The only guy in the whole place that was labor showed up on Labor Day to work.
Yeah. Yeah, the one guy who doesn't get paid by what he does gets paid by the time that he's there.
The one guy that should have got Labor Day off, and everybody just suck it. It's Labor Day. He took the day off. None of the artists showed up because it was Labor Day. So I got a different crew now, but all the people got now understand.
And imagine like a day like that. Again, like you said, it's a day that you really don't think about.
Feel
but there's
my
probably
frustration.
a lot of people who would sit there and go, "Oh shit, let's
Looking
go
for
get
service.
tattooed. Let's go. We need something to do today."
Yeah, looking for service.
Especially when it's a day for like blue collar workers who don't ever have a weekday off. It's like, hey, here's a day you can have off and go get tattooed that you normally wouldn't be able to. What now I know you've also been a motorcycle enthusiast. I would imagine most of your life. And we were talking about your Chevy before we started rolling that you had that Jim Green redid. Is there a time that you were like, did it start with motorcycles? Was it cars first?
My dad had an image of himself was a guy that had a son with a motorcycle. So when I was like 8 years old, he got me a mini bike, and I was hooked.
Okay.
And so from then on, I always had a motorized two-wheeler from then on. And yeah, and then he's a car nut too. And my parents sort of wanted me to understand the value of money. So they allowed me to own things, and they allowed me to work and make money. Like, so I started mowing yards when I was big enough to push a lawnmower.
Yeah.
And I charged the neighbors $2.50, and I soon got a huge business. I had a whole bunch of people on their lawn mowed. It was frustrating me because I really didn't want to work that hard.
Right.
I wanted to play and stuff, but had this access to money, and I made enough money to buy a lawnmower the first summer I did it. So I had a new lawnmower then, and I continued doing it because I was a kid, so I'd do the same thing. So I just was working. And yeah, when I was 14, I was 13, 14. I mowed the lady next door. I mowed her yard, and she had just got a new car. It was a Falcon. And her old car was still sitting there. It was an old Ford Falcon. And it was an old 62 Falcon still sitting in her driveway. And her new one was sitting there. So I mowed her yard the first time that early summer. And I asked her, well, what are you doing with the old car? She said, well, I'd be embarrassed to take any money for it. I'm like, wow. And so I mowed her yard. And when I got done mowing her yard, she came out with the title of this old car and signed it over to me. And just gave me the car.
Wow.
So I jumped in it. I'm 13 or 14 years old. And I pushed the clutch in and I rolled it down in front of my house and parked it out front. And I went in and told my parents, hey, I got me a car.
Yeah.
And they're like totally down with it. Like, cool. 14-year-old owns a car now. So my dad was really cool. It's a 62 Falcon. And he loved Fords and he loved tinkering with cars. So he made me take the damn thing all apart. He supervised me. I had to take it all apart. I packed the wheel bearings. I put new wheel bearings in the wheels and, tapped the races in and the wheels and all that's Ford. And so, and completely redid it. We took the motor apart and put new pistons in it and bored the cylinders and whole thing. We put this thing all back together. So by the time I was, I guess I got when I was 13 because by the time I was 14, I had a complete ready to go car.
Right.
And kids across the street, their grandpa was the big boss, the main boss of a farm owned by Lamar Hunt, owner of the Chiefs.
Okay.
And he's got the biggest farm in the Midwest is north of the river, and it just goes out forever. And he keeps cattle on it. It's the biggest cattle ranch in the Midwest. And so they're 15 and 16, and their grandpa told them that they could work on the ranch in the summertime. Well, they can't get back and forth north of the river, and they don't have a car. And I'm 14, I got a car, but so they came to me. They're like, "Hey, my grandpa will give you a job. Like you can work on the cattle ranch this summer. One thing is, we need to drive your car."
Right.
So I went to my parents, and they were good with it. They're like, okay, you guys buy the insurance. We'll let Frankie drive. You go work on the ranch. So 14 years old, I got a job on a cattle ranch.
Okay.
We would jump in my car, the three of us, and we'd drive clear out north of the river, and I'd work on the cattle ranch all day. And then we'd drive all the way back south. But yeah, so that was my first paycheck job working on shooting cows around on the Midwest's largest cattle ranch. It was because I had a car.
Just because you had a car.
Yep.
What part of town did you grow up in?
Mostly South Kansas City.
Okay.
Ruskin.
Yep. And then from there, so that starts there. When did you buy your first Harley Davidson?
I was working on a boat, and a friend of mine got out of the Navy, and he showed up with one. He'd only been out of the Navy 2 days, and he's got a brand new Harley. I thought, this dude don't even have a job.
Yeah.
How did he get a brand new Harley? So I was driving a Triumph 750, and I drove to the Harley dealership out there in Belton, and I was like, can I trade this for a Harley? They're like, yeah, no problem. And they fixed me up. The next day, I drove off in a Sportster.
Oh, nice. So that would have been Ironhead then.
That was 1979.
Okay.
It was beautiful, AMF. They made some beautiful motorcycles, and I bought the most expensive one, that gray with the gold leaf letters on it. It's like gray and black, I think. It was like a real dark gray.
Yeah.
They were all the same color. It was a dark gray with that gold leaf, and it was totally decked out. It had a 2-inch over front end. It had a 1200 cc motor. No, that was 1000 cc's instead of a 883.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was beautiful. That 79 Sportster, yep.
Yeah, I had one of those AMF Sportsters, 1000. That was my first
God, they were beautiful.
chopper. Was
It had a
one
big
of those.
extra fat back tire that was
Right.
sort of trendy back then.
Yeah. When did you
Dual disc front brakes.
And then, so I imagine at a certain point you would just take off on your bike when you'd go on these tattoo trips. Then, right? Like, would you just ride your bike to wherever and there you were? And no.
Mm-mm.
You just
No, I've seen people that did that. There was an old guy named Tramp that used to like tattoo off of his battery and shit. That was kind of a dirty act there. It was cool and very romantic.
I guess
it was filthy, and you can't do that. You use all the shit you got to bring with you. You can't bring all that crap.
Yeah,
on
I
a
was gonna say. I
motorcycle.
guess back then you couldn't bring all your equipment with you, as to where now I got a buddy Harold that owns Weirdos in Belton.
I know Harold.
Harold, you switched
a
to
good friend of
using
mine.
one of those. He's like a brother to me.
He's tattooing with a dildo.
Yeah, and he's
It's
like,
sad.
I could just get on my chopper and drive to Texas. He just did this. He made
Whatever.
me get tattooed while I
You
interviewed
could stick
for
that
the
cold
channel.
machine in his pocket
It's
too,
like,
whatever.
yeah, he's like, oh man, there's like this whole thing going on with people about these machines. I'm like, yeah, whatever, man. I don't.
Loyal to the coil here, man.
Yeah.
And so
Oh, you're
we're like-
definitely. I mean, everything about. I would imagine everything. The entire aesthetic, the way your shop operates, the respect the people that work for you have for you, and the process the way you do things. I think it's all very old school, and it's real interesting to me because it's totally different than how. There's a lot of people, I think, that it's like any other business where they're like, oh, I want to be a tattoo artist, and then they go apprentice for a guy, and then a month after they've gotten their license, now they're opening their own place around the corner because they just want to do it their way. And
I can't really knock that. I mean,
Yeah.
I love America. I love the way people do that. But the really satisfying thing for me, what I'm trying to do, is everybody's doing all kinds of different things.
yeah,
You get all kinds of ideas of the way to progress tattooing, or how they bring it into the future for themselves, or whatever it is. It's like a million different ways to do it. But the satisfying thing for me is bringing my culture on and passing it on, and seeing
Right.
that work for people. I see the people that surround themselves around what we're doing here, and understand our process, feed their families with this thing. It works, and it's a thing that great grandpa brought to grandpa, and grandpa brought it to me. And it's just it's the best way I can describe it is a tattoo culture.
yeah, no, definitely. I think it's. I was. That's what I was. My comment was going to be on the whole thing is that I feel like there's a lack of. I feel like that's the thing that I remember as a kid when I first got tattooed when I was 18. That it was like, that was the culture of tattooing. You know what I mean? Was that like there was no. You didn't need to call me on the phone and plan 8 months in advance and make a deposit. Like, I came into your shop, I was like, I'd like this, and the guy would say, okay,
Yeah.
and you'd give him the money, and then
Part of the culture was the process.
Right.
You know, how does the whole process work from the customer thinking I'd like to get a tattoo to walking out the door with a bandage, and so we have a process that was brought to me by my great grandfather. This is sort of how you do it,
yeah.
and so yeah, that
And that's the amazing thing is that even in the modern day, that culture that's from the 40s
It works.
originally, and it still works today.
well,
you know?
it's what did work, and it worked all along, and it works now. It'll work in the future.
Right.
But what the contrast is there's a whole bunch of people that are very interested in tattoo, very
Right.
dedicated to it, that study it in every way they possibly can. But what they can't have is the culture.
Right.
You have to be there. You know,
You have to be a part of it.
you have you have to be a part of it, learn what the culture is, because that's what culture is. It's
Right.
me passing all the stuff that I learned from Grandpa on to you. So now you don't have to try to learn all that shit. You got it.
Right.
Now you can pass it on, and you can add to it. That's what culture is. And so a whole lot of people just study it hard, and they get everything they can, and they're great artists. A lot of them even learn how to tattoo really well, but they don't understand the procedure that we do, and they don't understand how they don't treat their customers the same way we do. They don't set up their architecture, how everything's arranged the same way we do, because everybody's got a different idea how to pursue this.
Yeah.
And everyone's free to do it, which is really I'm And what we're bringing is what great grandpa brought.
Right. I think it's great. I think I'm glad, like, I love how you have the other shops the same way. There's fucking flash everywhere. There's tattoos everywhere. And again, when I 18-year-old me in high school went to get my first tattoo right here, and it was, okay, well, what do you want? I want that one right there.
Yeah,
and that was the first one, you know?
Well, you look at the name. The name Flash is a carnival term. And just look at that face value, Flash.
Yeah.
You know, it's a dazzling array.
Right.
Man, it used to be. It's been really interesting. Just a short time I've been tattooing, it's like a little over 40 years. But just in that short time, watching the progression of what Flash is,
right,
has really been interesting. When I walked in the tattoo shop in 1980, there was all hand drawn and painted Flash on the walls. Every design was hand drawn and painted, and the reason for that was that when people walked into a tattoo shop and they saw those designs, like say even back as early as the 1910 or 20s, it looked like a bottomless pit. Surely there was no other wear that had this large of a collection of designs.
Right.
So it's like you're looking at a bottomless pit, is what it felt like. That was the reason for filling up the room with all them designs.
Yeah.
And so later on, as it progresses, well, they started selling. After I started tattooing, they came up with copy machines.
Right.
Really, in 1980, nobody had a fucking copy machine. Seriously. Right. So they had copy machines. So artists started doing Flash on copy paper, and then you could buy it. So you could buy 10, 20, 100 sheets instead of taking 100 days to draw it and paint it. And so then it was just black and white copy machines. So all this Flash had arrived just black and white. And so, but you couldn't paint copy paper. So we had to color it with pencils. So we'd finish by coloring it with pencils.
Okay.
So we have tons of it that I colored with pencils. And then it became this like arms race. So tattoo shops had to have a lot of Flash. It was like, we have more. Because people wanted to look into that bottomless pit.
Yeah.
So it became, there wasn't enough room on the walls for all this stuff. Now it's just coming in tons of it coming.
Yeah.
And you're ordering Flash every month. And so you get, you might have 100 new sheets of Flash every month. You can color it in and hang it on the wall. The walls are already full. So we started having them Flash racks where you get a whole tattoo shop into one rack.
Yeah.
So you got rack after rack after rack. I ended up with like 8 tattoo racks full of tattoo Flash. And so people flip through those because you want to have more than everyone else, right? So, and then it progressed to where people didn't flip through those things anymore. They didn't look at the wall. They didn't flip through the racks anymore. They walked in with their phone in their hand. So now people are Google their design. That's what they want to see, the end of the bottomless pit.
Right.
And so now that's the bottomless pit. This is finite. This is all shit in one room. This is infinite.
Right.
The bottomless pit. So they went straight to the bottomless pit, and that's where we're at now. That's what Flash is now. It's on your phone. And since nobody flips those racks anymore, I took all that copy Flash down, and I hung up all of this. It's come full circle around.
Right.
I hung all this hand-drawn, painted Flash. When I started taking it off the wall, it was 40 years old or so. Now it's 80 years old. It's much more interesting.
Right. It came back around, right, to where it's more interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and also gives, it's like I always tell people, like, when it comes to like custom paint, like a lot of people have a false memory of eras and what was painted. You know, they think like, oh, this is just how they painted motorcycles in 1960, and it's like, well, no, that's kind of how they painted Hondas in 1972, but nobody was painting Harley choppers like that. Like, there's a lot of things that people think, oh, they put big bass. They did not do. There was maybe one, like,
I got
a
an
lot
example for you there. My 56 Chevy, I went to restore it, right?
Yeah.
And so we got all the way, it's all done now, it needs paint. Like, what color you want this thing? And I'm like, I want that classic Chevrolet red and tomato soup red. White and tomato soup red.
Yeah.
That classic Chevy tomato soup red. And so they're like, yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about. So a couple days later, he says, look, man, there's no tomato soup red. He goes, Chevy didn't paint any of those cars that way. There's a red they call Matador red,
Yeah.
which is really red. And after about 10 years, it starts looking like tomato soup, starts oxidizing.
Yeah.
And so it gets that pinkish, a little orangey.
Yeah.
And it starts looking like a tomato soup. He goes, that's what you want. And it's absolutely spot on. I painted that car red, had it for 30 years, and in about 10 years, it started turning that tomato. That classic. That's what I remember, from when I was a kid. Because
it was all the lacquer paint faded out of it.
There was a whole lot of 10-year-old 56 and 57 Chevys running around when I was 10 years old.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And then now you have, what I was going to say was you have, like, this is finite in that this is, not only is this what the designs look like, these are the literal designs that you guys were doing.
Yeah.
And before that, I'm sure some of it's from your great-grandfather as well. So
Well, most of it was grandpa, great-grandpa, and several old dead guys that great-grandpa worked with.
Right. That's all just, and you've taken care of it. And it all looks great. I know Davey loves it. Do you think that you inspire the people that work for you to get interested in old cars and motorcycles at all? Have you ever thought about that?
I don't know if I inspire anyone like that. I definitely, when someone in my circle has an interest in that type of thing, I definitely encourage them.
Right. I just know that because Wendy used to work for you.
Oh, Wendy comes in and
but she
look, I told Wendy one day, I said, look, I'm going to paint my car, so I'm looking for, I'm going to buy another hot rod.
Yeah.
So while I'm painting my car, I got something to drive, but I got some money saved up, I'm going to buy me a hot rod. And I know you guys, you see that stuff. So let me know. She says, I think I ought to buy a hot rod too. I've been thinking. I said, yeah, Wendy, you should buy a hot rod.
Yeah.
Like, I encourage anyone.
Yeah.
What you should do is buy a hot rod. Fuck yeah, buy a 50s Chevy, man.
Yeah.
Because for a million reasons, you don't have car payments anymore. You can get insurance for $200 a year. The list goes on and on and on. Buy an old Chevy. It's the coolest thing in the world. So easy maintenance, cheap parts. Oh, my God, buy a hot rod.
Right.
And so I talked to her. She says, yeah, Chris told me I should buy a hot rod too. I said, yeah, I think you should. So 2 days later, she rolls up in that damn 52.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where's mine? I thought you were looking for a hot rod for me.
Yeah.
She goes, but I was like, what'd you pay for that? $5,000. I'm like, damn, I'll give you $10,000 for it right now.
Yeah.
She just laughed at me. She said, no, I thought you were looking for a car for me. You bought my car.
And now, my good friend Nick is the one that painted the roof for her.
Yeah.
And
that's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, and it came out great. And it's just a thing I've seen, like, even Davey started, like, he kind of had an interest in cars, but it was mostly motorcycles. But now the longer he's worked for you, he's always got a cool car now. Like, he's got the Cadillac, and then he wants to get his old truck back. And I have his old van now that I just got this week.
Appreciate that. The best example I think I said is driving that same damn car for 35 years.
Right.
I drove that 56 Chevy, my daily driver for.
And showing people that it's possible.
I had it in California. I had it in Dallas. I used to commute all the way across, back and forth in Dallas in that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I drove it back and forth to California.
And you have a truck now, right? Did you get
a
truck?
I got a 56 Apache.
Right. Because you got rid of the... You got rid of the
yeah,
car.
I went to the Chevy needed a paint after Well, you know, Chevy's like, in 10 years, everything has to be redone.
Yeah.
Everything falls apart in 10 years. But so here, you know, I had it restored. And then 30 years later, man, it really needs to be restored again.
Yeah.
It really does. 30-year-old Chevy, I mean, it's wore out.
Right.
And this thing's, you know, more than 50 years old, so I'm 60 years old. So like, I have to have this painted, restored. So I took it, and they looked at it and they said, okay, it's going to cost you 90 grand, and it's going to take, you know, all winter long. So I'm like, okay, we'll start on, I'll pay a little at a time. And I looked around and I found this old pickup truck, so I bought that to drive. And they called me back again. And they said, well, your frame is so old, you can't even box it in. It's just like roached.
Yeah.
They said, you're going to need a new frame. So the top's broken. Now the bottom's broken. I'm like, I got to sell this car.
Yeah.
I need to get rid of it. And I don't want to sell it to a friend or a family because
Yeah.
this thing's just, it's roached. You know?
Yeah.
Mechanically, it runs great. I kept it running like a hot rod. It'll do burn rubber right now, but the whole thing might just fold up in half.
Yeah, and the restorations that we, again, my industry has advanced a lot, and the restorations that they were capable of doing 30 years ago is way different than what we, like, the materials we have are better. We have, over time, we've learned, like, okay, well, what causes the problems? Like, what causes these things? And we've made solutions to fix all that. So you can do a car now that would literally last longer than a new car, right? Because, like, most 5-year-old pickup trucks have rusted quarters on them now. But there's also a point where it's almost impossible
it was the
living
frame.
here. Yeah.
And the A-arms had already pulled out of the frame on both sides.
Oh,
just
yeah,
ripped
so
loose.
it was, right. Yeah.
Just metal fatigue. The car at one time was a circle chaser. You know, they had it on a
Oh, wow,
they had it
yeah.
on a track. They raced it a while, and so yeah, just too many turning left, I guess. Just metal fatigue. So the wheels were falling off. Everything else, it's like, nah, needs a new frame. Well, you need the bottom and the top. Thing's broken. Throw it away.
Yeah.
But I sold it to a mechanic who looked at it for 3 days before he bought it, and he was ecstatic.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what he's buying, and he couldn't believe that he was buying a '56 Chevy.
Yeah,
So
they're
we were
really
both
hard
happy.
to get. It's like a lot of people's mecha car, and they're really hard to find. It's hard to find one that still is actually a '56 Chevy and not a
Some other frame.
LMC.
Yeah, this dude's all original except for the motor and the
Right.
transmission.
Yeah, because it would have a small block in it.
Yeah, it's the 350. Yeah,
Yeah. How do you like the truck?
it's totally different because Chevy, the 350. I mean, you turn that thing on, the whole thing vibrates. It sounds like a race car.
Yeah.
It looks like a race car. Everybody challenges you. And
Right.
Your nuts are bigger than everyone else's. So, fuck you. I'm faster than you. Just
Yeah.
all racing all the time. I've been driving that stupid thing for 30 years. Campaigning that stupid car. Making a bunch of noise, And I got beat by a Tesla one day. Not long before I sold it.
Yeah. The rain is over.
The dude went by me, and I thought, well, that's stupid. You're just going to have to stop for that light up there. And I know this street. By the time I get there, it's going to be green. I ain't even going to slow down. And I didn't realize it was a Tesla, but I said, he goes by me, and he stops at the light. So I'm cruising up on it. Light turned green. Right when I got there, light turned green. I didn't even slow down. I fucking jammed down second gear. I never should have saw that motherfucker again in the rest of my life. I never should have saw him again ever, right?
Yeah.
He said stand still. As I go by him, down in the second gear. I'm gone, man. I make a bunch of noise. Thing pins me to my seat. I go to hit third gear. Shoo! He went by me without making a noise.
Yeah.
From dead stop.
Yeah.
And I was already moving, and I downshifted in the second gear. I should have never saw that guy again. Shoo! Before I hit third gear. I'm like, this whole thing is pointless.
Yeah.
This is fucking pointless. The race is over. They win.
Yeah.
I'm done. This is just this is old shit that ain't fast no more. It's just stupid and loud and noisy and stinky.
Yeah.
And so I'm fucking done. And so I got this truck. Is the slowest vehicle on the road.
Yeah.
There's no race in my game at all.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it. If you're not perfectly in tune with the truck, it just won't work.
Right.
Like if you try to think you're in a hurry, it won't shift.
Right, right. What is this?
You have to be in
six?
complete sync with this thing,
Yeah.
and it's fucking slow.
Yeah, inline six-cylinder, 3-speed.
Yeah, and steering wheel this big around, you have to turn it around 3 times just to make a 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
It's all the way around like that, and you got to get it all the way around there. So even going slow, you have to do this with the steering wheel. You know what I mean? With both hands. It's just big around, and the shift patterns. It's a 4-speed with a shift pattern like that. So you'd be driving along, you're like, "Oh, I got to shift," and you look down. Where did I put that gear shift? Oh yeah, I left it over here. You have to look for it. Look, where is that thing?
Yeah.
It could be anywhere in here.
Yeah, there's get so much slop in them, and
Big old
yeah, it's a whole different
shift
experience,
pattern.
right?
It is. It's so slow. It's just its own pace. I really enjoy it.
They those kind of car, and I feel the same way about that Dodge van I just got that used to be Davies, that old tradesman. They teach you a lot of patience because, like you said, you can't. It's there's no jamming the gears. It's
You got
nice
to
and
be in
easy,
sync.
nice and easy.
You got to do what the transmission likes to do. Yeah, you have to be right there in sync.
And
It's cool as hell.
and that's your daily driver now, right? Like, yeah, you've always had a.
Yeah, when we get done, I'll take you over and show it to you.
Yeah,
It's
for
pretty-
sure.
It's pretty cool.
And I know. Do you have a Panhead now?
Yeah, I got a 58 Panhead. I've had that thing for almost 20 years now.
Wow. That's a serious. That's a.
It was a cool thing. A really close friend of mine, like a member, like my brother, was a member of the Huns. That was his club bike.
Okay. Oh,
They
cool.
did all that helmet protest in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the bike he campaigned on. Well, and then he wrecked it, hurt his leg real bad, and the Huns sort of put it up for a long time. And then years later, he went and drug it back up and restored it. And that's when I started looking at it. And he had it for quite some time. He was always talking about selling it. So I got the Panhead for sale because I'm trying to buy this or that. And I tried to buy it a few times, but I never had enough money. And the price kept going up. And then one day he said something about, talked to him, I was in Hawaii, and I called him on the phone. And he said he's trying to sell the Panhead again. I'm like, ugh. And he said he's going to try to buy a boat. Well, at that time, I had a great big boat.
Right.
I had a 40-foot boat. So I'm like, I got a 40-foot boat, dude. You want to trade? So I traded him Panhead for the boat. And so I've had a Panhead for like 20 years now.
That's awesome. And it's like I've
It's
seen
been in
I've
family
seen it 'cause
forever.
it's always parked up. That's the great thing is I can just drive past. Like that's what I've noticed. Like I love. Like I can always drive past your shop on Broadway and know like I'm gonna see something cool parked out front of the tattoo shop. There's always like a cool car, a cool bike. I fucking love Davy's Cadillac that he has now.
Yeah,
that
wow.
thing's super bitchin', right? Like what a find. Like to find something like perfectly preserved in like this state of like it's
This
one of
is
those weird things like you don't see a lot of those because they all got crushed or
So when he
destroyed.
first bought it, he let me drive it for 2 weeks. He just bought it. And he let me drive it for 2 weeks because my truck was laid up and he has a van. And he didn't have nowhere to park it and shit like that. And I got a driveway. So he's like, why don't you just drive this till your truck gets done? I'm like, okay. So I jumped in that. He just bought it. Like the day after he bought it, I jumped in it and I started driving it. And so it only had 19,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
That is the newest car that I ever drove in
Wow.
my life.
Yeah.
Was that 30-year-old Cadillac.
Yeah.
I never ever drove a car with that low of a mileage on it.
That's wow.
That thing was and then it scared me to death because I kept thinking I'm going to put a ding in this thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to scratch it or something like that. And it was like when I gave it back to him, I'm like, ugh, I'm scared to drive it anymore.
Yeah, because anything else you just
Yeah, and it was so cool. It had less than
Drive
19. It had 19,000 something miles on it. And then when I gave it back, I had 20,000. And I was like, I don't want to keep doing this.
Yeah. I'd have drove it every day.
I did for 2
town,
weeks.
Like, here you
And
go,
I
Dave.
did
It
enjoy
had
it.
30,000 miles on by the time I gave it back to him. Oh, why don't we? So we're sitting inside. You opened up a museum, essentially for your. It's sort of a history of tattooing, but also it sort of tells the story of your family, really, like, which is a pretty wild thing that your lineage has been it's a pretty big part of the tattoo story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you know, just like I look at it like when I started, there weren't that many people. There weren't as many people in tattooing as there are now.
Right.
And so yeah, it was kind of a rare thing. Bert, great grandpa, opened a tattoo shop well, first he was born in 1900. 1900.
Okay.
So, and then 1916, he was 16 years old. He opened a tattoo shop in Chicago.
Okay.
And he put his name on a sign out front and everything. The story goes that he used to tell. He said his uncle came by and tore the sign off the building and beat him up and told him he was going to ruin the family's reputation. So that's when he adopted the name Grimm, Bert Grimm.
Okay.
It's a trade name.
Right.
That wasn't his name originally. So he adopted a trade name, Bert Grimm, put the sign up there, no problem. But the family didn't want the actual family name up there. Said it was ruin their reputation. So yeah, so he started tattooing as Bert Grimm in 1916, and then had a long career. He worked with, that year that he was there in that shop, Buffalo Bill walked in and hired him to work the Wild West show.
Okay.
And then from then on, he worked Wild West shows and circuses until 1926 he opened a shop in St. Louis.
Wow.
He was there 30 years, and then he ended up in Long Beach.
So that's how your family sort of ended up in Kansas City then, was that the connection of how you, just being there and then...
Grandpa married a girl here, and he grew up here, so Grandpa
Okay.
was pretty much tied to Kansas City.
Okay. And what year did he start doing the traveling stuff? Your grandpa, not your great.
Well, Grandpa, you know, he tattooed his whole life. When he was 15, Bert tattooed his whole chest.
Okay.
The whole chest piece when he was 15. He went to East High School, and they wouldn't let him play intramural sports as a skin. You know, shirts
Oh yeah,
and skins.
shirts and skins.
He always had to be on shirts because they wouldn't let him take his shirt off.
Wow.
And even if he did, it would be confusing because it looks like he's got a shirt on.
Right.
So, so yeah, he got tattooed when he was 15. So that was always a part of. He grew up in the culture, and Grandpa was a big old guy, and he was a weightlifter and a bodybuilder back when that was an unusual thing.
Yeah.
And he was a member of the Screen Actors Guild. They had a movie business industry in Kansas City at that time.
Right.
Some of his wrestling buddies were extras in westerns. He was a professional wrestler when he was young.
Okay.
His early 20s. Yeah, back in the day when they would carry a tent to your town, your neighborhood,
Right.
set up the tent, and
then-
because you have to go outside to be entertained, nobody had TV. So
Right.
to be entertained, you go outside. People would come to the tent and they'd put on a big show.
Right.
And then they'd all take the tent down and move it on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he was a professional wrestler. He did that.
Wow.
So big, loud showman, basically.
Yeah.
Doing the big emoting, acting.
Yeah.
He was just kind of that kind of guy,
Just a
bigger
character.
than life. And he was a great big guy, you know, big
Right.
neck, big chest, and he was huge. Yeah. He was a really interesting character, Grandpa. He did a lot of things. He kept bees. When I was a
Okay.
kid, I'd go help him with putting the honey up and put it in the extractor and put it in the jars and put the labels on the jars, all that stuff. He kept bees. He trained, and showed Missouri foxtrotters, which is a great big fancy stepping horse.
Yeah.
So he had a horse ranch going on all the time.
Wow.
He-
All kinds of things.
He built his own, he had a big old McMansion out there in South Kansas City that he built.
Yeah.
He got the plans, he ordered the lumber delivered. He got a whole bunch of his family over there, and it was like a barn raising. He organized all that and built a house.
Wow.
It was a gorgeous, great big estate. He really was a big man in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. He was a great leader if you wanted somebody to follow.
Yeah. What year did he pass away?
'88, I think.
Okay. Wild. Man, that's a whole lot to do in a. So opening the actual physical shop, was that kind of like his like, I'm ready to chill out and just tattoo?
He
finally?
talked about opening a shop, and he had he had the whole setup in the basement, and he had people over there a couple times a week and tattooed him, and that whole biker thing he was all connected with, and but he always talked about opening a shop. He's always looking for a place to open. And after I heard that for a while, it's just like, well, it's just Grandpa's dreaming. That's how Grandpa dreams. He's gonna open a shop someday. And then when I got off the boat and saw that in the newspaper, I had the worst sinking feeling. It was like, damn, they're leaving me behind.
Yeah.
I thought I was a part of this thing.
Yeah.
So I got busy and started taking a lot more interest in it and giving him a lot more of my time.
Yeah, and now you're just you're carrying it on, but I really think this is a really cool thing that you have going here. How you have a second location now where it's not only can you come here to get tattooed, but you can also come by here and see the entire history of modern electric tattooing. And I don't know if there's anywhere else that you can do
The fun part about it for me was like I had all this stuff,
Right.
And it was all in a few boxes, like big boxes, all stacked up in there. And once in a while, I'd take a box, like carry it into a tattoo shop. Hey guys, you ought to see this. And everybody in the shop would get all around the boxes, and we'd take it all out. And it would take all day to get all that stuff out,
Right.
And look at it, and talk about it, and compare it, and
Then you'd put it all back in the box.
And then I put it all back in the box and carry it back home and put it back in the attic or whatever. Yeah, and so I carried that stuff around for decades like that. And the thing that I lacked was a dream. I had all that stuff. I loved showing it and everything, but I didn't have the dream. And then so Davey comes along with it. He was like, "Wow, you could have a museum." Davey had this big dream of what this could be, and I never thought about that way. And so then the real jelly moment for me when everything just sort of came together is when I started getting that stuff out of the box and they started hanging it on the wall. And it was like, wow, I finally got it out of the box.
Right, it's out of the box.
Wow. Wow, what a relief, yeah. And so all this place has a home now. And before, where I'd look at something, like I have Bert Grimm's billfold with his driver's license.
Right.
And once in a while, I'd open up my desk and I'd see it, and I'd pick it up and I'd cherish it. And it's a wonderful thing. But then it goes back in the desk and shut the drawer.
Right.
And I don't really have a place for that it should be. And so now I do. Whenever I run across something like, wow, this is a precious thing that I just got laying over here in the corner in the box. This has a place. I know where to put it.
Yeah, you can bring it right up here.
Yeah, I can unload all that stuff here. I don't even have to worry about it no more. Now I have a place for it.
Right. And your shop is open 7 days a week. Is it open 7 days a week?
Mm-hmm.
The main shop, noon to noon. And
Noon till midnight.
Noon till midnight. Well, that's noon to noon. Some people's noon is midnight. Noon to midnight, and that's on Broadway and 39th Street. And then we're sitting in the museum, which is right around the corner. And what are the hours here?
That's hard to say.
It's sort of. When there's, Davey's here most.
They're here from 10 till 7:30 every day, I think, except Tuesday, today.
Every day except for today.
And that does change around because some of us have kids. And you know how that is. Your kid's got a schedule on this one day, and then the next time he's a different school or whatever.
So if you're watching this and you come to the museum and no one's here, you can literally take a half a block trip around the corner and you'll be at the original shop. And you can go in there and you can harass Wes at some point and ask him about his cool chopper. And there's also a lot of cool shit at that tattoo shop. Like we were talking about how Jim Green did your Chevy that we spoke about earlier. And you have that mini chopper he built. And there's like so much history involved with that stuff too. That's just comes from being here, and living in town.
Yeah, being in Kansas City.
And again, it's like this link of like, there's like this weird link I've been trying to unfold while talking to people where it's like, okay, there's some weird link between customizing a car or a motorcycle and driving it all the time and not caring about like this DIY idea that's linked to tattooing that's also linked to art, you know what I mean? And it's sort of, you meet these people where it's like no one has this like attitude of like, oh, I'm fucking cool, you know what I mean? Like, because they're the people who are like doing the thing, you know what I mean? So like it's really awesome, and I'm stoked that you talked to me because you've been doing it. I've seen you, like I said, when my band played, you used to hang the flyers up for us down on Westport Road, and like you've always, like, again, even there was always some fucking cool thing parked out front, you know what I mean?
It reminded me of a story. I had Jim Green's outfit there, Wild Childs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had him paint a Camaro for me.
Okay.
They painted it flat black. I was trying to avoid radar on the highway. Turned out it worked pretty good.
Yeah.
So painted this thing flat black. And when they deliver it, the painter, Jim's painter, he brought it over. He's an old friend of mine. But he pulled it up out front. He says, "Come out and look at your car. It's all done." So he delivered it. And I went out and looked at it. And it was all done. It was flat back, front to back. And I bent over and picked up a rock. And I threw it at the car. Skipped it off the hood. I thought that guy was going to kill me.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to jump on me and strangle me. His face turned red. He started hopping around. What the hell? He flipped that fuck out. And I told him, like, why did you do that? And I said, well, I did that so I don't have to kill somebody.
Yeah. Now you don't care. You're just going to drive it and not worry.
Like, from here on, the first contact I had with that car, I bounced a rock off the fucking hood. You know, you can't hurt it now.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you talking to me today, Wes. There's some great stories. I'm sure I'll come talk to you again sometime in the future. Maybe I have to get you and Davey at the same time on one of these. That's quite the thing. I met Davey off of a Craigslist deal.
Yeah.
He had an Ironhead chopper, and I had a couple of cars I had been working on, and I hit him up because I didn't have anywhere to keep the cars and keep building them. I was chopping the top on them and doing all kinds of wild shit, and shit was not going tight. And I said, dude, I'll trade you. Would you trade? And he goes, I'd love a trade. And I said, well, here's what I got, and I'll give you both of these cars for that Ironhead. And he said, sounds good. So I trucked them over there, kickstarted that motorcycle in the middle of winter. It barely ran, and rode it across town, throwing fringed tassel leather handlebar grips off of it as I rode. Like, these aren't fucking cool. Get these out of here. And my buddies follow me. I killed it at every light, and we took it down to the West Bottoms. And after that winter, then it became my only mode of transportation for a while. And Harold, who we talked about, Harold actually, he taught me how to ride with someone to the point of like, he would just get next to me on this raggedy ass chopper he had and put his foot on my peg and then just throttle it. And I'm like, what are you doing? It pushed me to make me go faster, but also if I didn't ride right next to him all the time, I would hear about it. So it got to where like now if I'm riding with somebody and they're not, it's like, hey, you got to be right here, man. Like you can't be back there because I can't see you. I got to know what you're doing. But yeah, so it's a weird, I think there's a lot of just everybody, we're all connected in some weird way, you know? But I appreciate it, Wes, man. It was great talking to you
Thanks,
today.
man. That was fun. Love a chance to get it out of the box, man, and show it off.
Yeah, so come by and check it all out, guys. It's all here.